Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is. Welcome to another episode of All Things Ilyast. This is your boy Omer Ilyas, who's back with another cracker of an episode, of course, bringing in all the entertainment. I hope whoever's watching this, I hope you're all well and everything in your life is going well, that you're happy and fulfilled. However, a reminder for this episode is that it will be slightly dark and could be distressing for some people. Not that a lot of people watch it, but whoever does, we will touch on topics like drone strikes and their respective civilian casualties. This has been something that's been on my mind, so we'll talk about that. And I'll try to sort of make it a bit more light in terms of its mood. As you might be aware, I'm sure that you are aware, there's been a constant conversation and a buzz around the American presidential elections. It's been a hot topic for a bit now. Biden versus Trump, who's better, who's worse. One opinion of myself is that if you're not from the US, I think you should probably relax like a little bit and just enjoy the show. Watch the empire crumble and see what it has come to. From, if you reflect from the times, like in the early 90s, the late 90s, the 2000s, the Obama administration, which is highly touted and admired, uh, with the majority, that is. But just enjoy the show. However, that brings me back to a time when I was growing up in Pakistan, and um, we've already had been through the Bush administration. The election in which Obama ran against Bush was the media coverage was very detailed, and even though I was young, I was very aware of what was happening, and there was a positive outlook overall about the election itself. On January 23rd, 2009, Obama's third day in office, a Predator drone flying over Pakistan released a Hellfire missile that slammed into a suspected Taliban compound, killing 18 people inside, as per the Washington Post. Third day in the office. And I remember the newspaper that we used to get. It was a weekly thing, so we get the paper on the weekend, and I'm reading it. The first headline is about the drone incident. And I'm thinking to myself that in his campaign and after what we sort of had endured in terms of the US involvement in eradication of terrorism in Afghanistan, maybe this was a fresh start for Pakistan as well. Maybe the political and the security instability will finally stop, and we'll be able to live a life without fear of militants or a US invasion or any of the sort of the fears which I had in my early teen like brain. So I read the paper and the headline, and I'm taken aback. And I hand it to my dad, and I say to him, "Hey, how come this is still happening?" And he has a brief look at the paper. He looks back at me, he smiles, and he says, "Yeah, of course they are." And I say to him that, well, I thought Obama would be different. Unlike George Bush, who I obviously believed was the devil incarnate and was intimidated by him. So my dad then looks back at me and he says, "It is how it is, son. This is not going to stop for the foreseeable future. They have the power, they have the technology. So this comes with the chair, and the chair in this case which is the presidency of the US, or the leadership of the free world, as they say it, or like to call it." And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, Obama is the good guy. He's obviously, like he's very sort of well spoken, he's well put together. He probably would have a bit more humanity. Not that I could like process that sort of perspective at that age, but in my head, he was in the office now, everything for everybody. not just the Americans, even for us across the world, for the Afghans, for everyone would improve because he's just nice. He seems nice. Then I think to myself, maybe since Obama is a good guy, maybe it is us. Maybe they actually are just hunting the bad guys and the drone strikes are actually fine. And I expressed this opinion to my dad. And he says, Omer, if you've ever gone to school on like a Wednesday, you know who I am, yes? And I say, yes. He says, do you think I'm involved in anything illegal or any militant activity? And I say, obviously not. And he goes, well, imagine on a weekday you've gone to school, you've come back, and you find out that a drone attack has taken out your house, the neighbor's house, the house next to the neighbor's house. How would you feel about it? And for a brief moment, I think this is probably the first time I like consciously try to put myself like or empathize or put myself in the shoes of the people in the federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan, also known as FATA, which I think includes the area called the North Waziristan, where this strike obviously happened. And then I sort of tried to like process my emotion, and I said to my dad that I would be angry, I would be livid. And he said, would you care about the law, about what's right or wrong if that happened to you? And I said, no. He said, would you do anything you can in your power to exact revenge and retribution on whoever did that to your family? And I had to think about it. And I still remember feeling that anger. And I said, yes, of course. I wouldn't care about anyone. And my dad goes, well, there you go. That's your answer. So this is a consistent cycle of people who are impacted by these indiscriminate strikes, who then will do anything in their power which they can to exact revenge. In terms of the drone strikes, I've looked up some data on the internet. Within the Obama administration, there have been 373 drone strikes only in Pakistan during Obama's term as the US president. The civilian casualties are allegedly between somewhere from 424 to 969, and the children killed range from 172 to 207. According to the New America Foundation, 2006 till 2009 had some of the highest civilian casualty ratios for any years. And this data comes from a place which is overlooked by its own government, which is the government of Pakistan, and is getting constantly drone striked, for the lack of the better term here, by the US administration, as well as is under immense like pressure from the militant groups that operate within or outside of the areas to support them. So imagine being hammered and being ignored and being neglected from three sides. Imagine how would you feel if you had no one to help you. And Obama, during an interview to the press, in his very Obama-esque style, says, simply put, these strikes have saved lives. And then he pauses, obviously, because he would. And also defends America's actions as being legal and moral, which is very questionable. So this brings me to the question that I've had for the last few days, which is, what is the cost of a human life? How do you attach a value to an innocent life which is lost due to a conflict or anything? The accuracy and precision of the drones is well defended by the Americans, but it doesn't really answer the questions around the civilian casualties it has inflicted upon the people. This brings me to another incident which I had forgotten over the years, but now it's come back to me. On January 27th, 2001, Raymond Davis had his Jason Bourne-esque incident in Lahore, Pakistan. Raymond Davis, who was operating as a covert contracting intelligence officer for the CIA, was driving in Lahore when he was allegedly approached by two men brandishing a weapon. The two men were allegedly known as career criminals, known for small like thefts and other petty crimes. Being a highly trained intelligence officer, Raymond drew his gun and he would fire 10 rounds on the two men. The man who would brandish his weapon to Raymond would be shot 5 times within 1 to 3 seconds of approaching him. And Raymond would then leap out of his car and chase the other man trying to flee from him. And he would also unload another 5 rounds of ammunition from a 9mm in that man, instantly killing him at the scene. He would then take photos on his phone and then would call for help on the radio, which he possessed. An unmarked SUV would then cause another casualty by running down a civilian when trying to reach Raymond, who had by that time already fled the scene. He would eventually be flagged down by the Pakistani police and be later arrested. Incarcerated for 49 days, Raymond would cause a diplomatic row between Pakistan and the United States, with President Obama stating that Raymond is protected under diplomatic immunity, which, however, was not true. The United States, being in its might and power, would implement a tactic of stonewalling Pakistan and its respective agencies, be it the government or the intelligence agencies, and would not admit to Raymond being a spy or a covert CIA operative operating within the sovereign boundaries of Pakistan. However, the longer the saga would go and Raymond would still be incarcerated, they realized that the best strategy in this case was to come clean and to make the admission that Raymond was indeed not a diplomat. There have been a few claims about Raymond's actual work and what was found on the phone that he possessed at the time of his arrest. However, none of that can be verified to determine what extent of covert work Raymond was actually undertaking when this incident happened. On March 16th, 2011, the day of reckoning would approach Raymond, where he would be presented in a Pakistani court to be sentenced for a double homicide. Behind the scenes, the Pakistani intelligence agency, the ISI, and the CIA have concocted a plan to action a Sharia law practice called idiyat, smartly introduced, and with the families of the victims offered a certain amount, a lump sum amount, to forgive the actions of Raymond Davis, resulting in his release. He would then be quickly shifted to the Lahore airport, where he would take off and leave his actions and its respective consequences in Pakistan behind. However, the troubles wouldn't see the end of their relationship with Raymond. On October 1st, 2011, in Douglas County, Colorado, then a firearms instructor, Mr. Davis, eyeing a parking spot, would get into a scuffle with a 50-year-old Jeffrey Mays. And this would lead a misdemeanor charge against Mr. Davis. So finally, in a place where the rule of law was actually respected by Mr. Davis himself and the respective authorities, and where the value of human life was objectively higher than Lahore, where he had committed a double homicide, and he would be charged with a misdemeanor for assault. This brings me back to the question again. What is the value of a human life? Did Mr. Davis value a human life enough during his covert operation in Lahore that he would fire 10 rounds without hesitation, would calmly take photos, and would escape the crime scene. And as I told you earlier, this episode will be a bit dark in that regard. I'll try to keep it short, but I keep on asking myself the same question over and over. And I think the answer is it depends who the victim is and who the perpetrator is. It depends who the aggressor is and who is the oppressed. It's very subjective when it comes to the value of a human life outside of the Western civilization. And we also talked about the accuracy and precision of a drone strike. And I'll sort of shift away from that onto a funny story that I've got. My accuracy and precision while using public transport, especially a bus in Sydney. So while my parents were here, I thought it would be nice to take them to the Sydney CBD, and we'll just use the bus because there was either a train strike or something happening, and the trains in the area were not operating. My sense of direction is the worst there ever is. I can't remember where anything is. I forget where I'm supposed to be all the time. I have to use the GPS consistently. So I'm taking my parents to the CBD, and we get there in time because that's the last stop. There is an incident with a bus driver, obviously, because I asked him a few too many questions and he got mad at me for talking to him, and that's fine. He yelled at me, and that was okay. On the way back from the CBD, I didn't know what our stop was for the hotel. So, but I realized earlier that we had to stop at some point on this road, and I like press the stop button and it sort of makes a sound, and I realized that I made a mistake. I looked at my dad and he shook his head, and I just did this to the bus driver, and I could see his eyes looking at me in his rear view, and I just did this. And then we wait on the stop, and my hand is just itching. My hand is just itching to hit it because I don't want to miss the stop. And then we go to the next one, and I think it's this one, and I hit it, but it's not. I look at my father, and he goes, no, and I just do this again, and now I can see his eyes just, they're a bit more intense. And then I hit it again. That was not also our stop. And finally, I just say to my dad, you have to help me out here. And he goes, well, the one that is just over there that we're approaching, that's our stop. And I hit the button, and the bus stops, and I thank the guy, and he just looks at me with disgust. And I walk off the bus. In a similar incident, I think, the next day, there was a backpacker young female who came onto the bus, and she had a conversation with the bus driver and got yelled at, obviously. I'm not sure. I couldn't really understand what was said. But she comes back down on her seat, and I'm assuming she's already having a hard day. She's a backpacker in a foreign country, and she just got yelled at by some guy who's a bus driver. And as she's just holding her head in her sort of hands, I have this feeling. I'm like, maybe I should say something to sort of see if I can make it feel better. But once in my life, my brain went, I think you should mind your goddamn business. Take your parents where they're supposed to go, and then go home, man. You don't want any of this trouble with these these bus drivers. And I do still feel bad for not saying anything to make her feel better, or to just be like, hey, I also got yelled at yesterday, so I can understand your pain. With this episode being dark and talking about some sensitive issues, which might also get flagged by YouTube, I'm not sure. I've also, I think for the last year or so, I don't listen to as much music anymore. So I always play some podcasts in the gym. Now, it's very hard to listen to a comedy podcast, obviously, because then you're trying to lift weights and you're laughing. Because I played Theo Vaughn's podcast a few times, and it's just you're holding up weight, and then he says something hilarious and out of pocket, and you just can't do it. So I usually tend to play murder podcasts in the gym, which is also, I think it's a bit worrisome though. I worry about my mental health sometimes. How can you sort of have an intense workout when all you can hear in the background is like horrible acts committed by human beings? And as they say, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift this heavy ass weight. Thank you for watching the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. My apologies once again. It was a bit dark and gloomy. And I hope to see you in the next one.